Hi, welcome back to Busch History. I'm David Busch, and this is segment 2 of the Presidents series here on Busch History. And we're starting today with John Adams. John Adams, second President of the United States. John Adams was an interesting guy, brilliant guy. Remember, he helps write the Declaration of Independence, strong Federalist, helps with the Federalist Papers, wants the Constitution, wants a strong Federalist government. The problem is, he's following a rock star. He's following George Washington. And he's preceding another rock star, and that's Thomas Jefferson. And George Washington and Thomas Jefferson had huge personalities and lots of charisma, and John Adams didn't have any of that. He was kind of a cantankerous intellect. He was right, he was always right, you could never convince him otherwise, and he's a pretty smart guy and a great politician, but he rubbed people the wrong way, and sometimes made decisions a little too quickly. Let's take a look at John Adams here. So John Adams, second President of the United States. President John Adams, number 2 Vice President is Thomas Jefferson. Adams and Jefferson had run for the presidency, and in those days, the person with the second amount of votes became the Vice President, even if they disagreed with each other politically. And you may be well aware that John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, while friends, were political adversaries. John Adams was a Federalist. His term of office was 1797 to 1801, and you notice automatically that's one term, it's 4 years. Remember, presidents serve in odd years and they're elected in even years. Anytime you see a president with a one term, with 4 years for his term of office, is generally a problem. It doesn't mean that they're a bad president, it does mean that they're unpopular in most cases. A couple of presidents have elected to do just one term, that's true. But generally speaking, they want 2 terms. The first term, they run for re-election, is the saying, and the second term they run for the history books. John Adams, his personality got in the way and he made some silly mistakes. Who came before him and after him, and what were their political parties? George Washington, as we talked about previously, had no political party, came before him, and Thomas Jefferson, who was a Democratic Republican, followed him. Any unusual circumstances surrounding his ascent to the presidency? It was the first contested election because there were candidates involved here. The biggies, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was against the Federalist system and a strong central government, whereas Adams was a strong supporter of federalism and a strong central government. Adams won with 71 electors to 68 for Jefferson, and Jefferson became Adams' vice president. But just look at the numbers. 71 for Adams and 68 for Jefferson. So the country was nearly split as to who they wanted, Adams or Jefferson, and it's not going to be pretty for John Adams. Are there any catchphrases or terms specifically associated with this president? Midnight judges. And midnight judges was the term for the Federalist judges that John Adams attempted to appoint right before the Jefferson presidency began. We'll talk about that. When he left office, was it by choice, defeat, natural death, etc.? He was defeated by Thomas Jefferson in the election of 1800. And they call that the Peaceful Revolution. Well, I don't know how peaceful it was, because John Adams did not hang around for Thomas Jefferson's inauguration. He was pretty ticked off that he lost that election to Thomas Jefferson. Domestic issues and events. Well, he gets wrapped up in the Alien and Sedition Acts, and they're as a result of something called the XYZ affair, which is actually on the next slide. And the XYZ affair had to do with something that was going on with France called the Quasi-War. They're interrelated. I have separate slides, one for domestic and one for international. But to kind of bring them all together here, the Quasi-War was a semi-war, hence the term quasi, on the Atlantic Ocean between the United States and France, where France was pirateering American ships. So in an attempt to get the French to stop, John Adams wanted negotiations with the French. And the French said, okay. And the French emissaries, when they went to meet with the American delegation, demanded money. The press called it a bribe, the French called it tribute, but it was over $100,000. They wanted this money before they would negotiate. Well, Adams said, no, we're not going to pay the money. But it didn't matter that Adams said no, because what happens is, the Jeffersonians, who are Democratic Republicans in Congress, make a big deal about this, and it becomes a huge scandal. So, as a result of that, the Federalists in Congress convinced John Adams to pass the Alien and Sedition Acts. The Alien and Sedition Acts had to do with deporting new immigrants to the United States, who had not been here long enough to become citizens, and sedition acts had to do with putting people in jail who spoke out against the American government. Basically, he takes away the First Amendment. And we're a young nation at this time, and people are still very sensitive because they realized what they had fought for. And these alien and sedition acts made John Adams very unpopular. So unpopular that Virginia and Kentucky, the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions, they threatened to secede from the Union. They threatened to pull out. They said, well, you're going to do this? We don't want to be part of you guys. So they become the first states to threaten to leave the Union. And then in 1799, we get the Logan Act, named after Dr. George Logan of Pennsylvania. And the Logan Act has to do with, can a private citizen negotiate with a foreign nation? That's how loose the government was at the time. And the Logan Act says, no, a private citizen cannot make an agreement with a foreign nation. In 1799, we have another taxpayer revolt called the Friars' Rebellion. And in 1801, we have the Midnight Judges that I had mentioned a second ago. His foreign policy, I've spoken about, was the quasi-war and the XYZ affair. Both made him look very, very weak. So what happens was that because of the Jeffersonians speaking out against him in Congress, because of the Alien and Sedition Acts, which were bad ideas, because of the quasi-war and the XYZ affair, this very well-meaning, intelligent man just struggled as President of the United States. And he is defeated by Thomas Jefferson in the election of 1800, also known as the Peaceful Revolution. So I'm David Busch. Until next time, this is Busch History. And remember, all of this stuff is available on my website, www.buschhistory.net. Have a great day.